All right, guys, we'll get things started. Thanks so much for coming in. So we're going to go over some really cool topics today. They're not very exciting, but they're actually quite powerful to use. So when we're talking about market statistics and how we're going to discern and leverage the data to get favorable outcomes from our clients, ask yourselves a question: what are the typical metrics that us as realtors are going to want to use in order to leverage those positions to get favorable outcomes with our clients? Historically speaking, the numbers that we're going to get is active listings, active sales, list price to sales price ratio, absorption rate. Those are all the standard numbers, right? And I don't think that I would be lending you guys much service if I decided I was just going to regurgitate that stuff with you guys today. What I wanted to do is to share with you guys some of the data that I've been using with my clients that has taken some very difficult situations, clients and situations, and allowed me to actually secure, at least, well, on the selling side, some pretty substantial price adjustments. So before I get into the nuts and bolts of the data, there's one important thing that we need to be cognizant of before we go in and use the data and the information. What is imperative that we get before we do that? If anybody wants to ask a question, I want to go get a price adjustment for my seller, or I'm going to take on a listing. I want to make sure that I get the right price. What do I need to get in order to start that process? Like, what's the most important thing that I need? If anybody wants to take a stab at that. Tons of great realtors on this channel, so be curious. If nobody jumps in, then I'm going to go ahead and say it. But it was fun to see if somebody could take a jab at it. So the most important thing that we need, guys, is we need to establish goals and circumstances. So if you go to a stockbroker, or you go and you want to invest in a mutual fund, the most important thing that person, the consultant, is going to do with you before they sell you any mutual fund is they're going to ask you what your risk tolerances are. And then they're going to ask you how much of your personal income you're planning on putting in. And then they're going to ask you, what are your goals? Do you want to be a year, 3 years, 5 years? And what do you intend to do with the money? Right? And from there, they're able to put you in the right program based on what it is that you're doing, what it is that you want. So the same thing with real estate, guys, is so important. When you're going to go meet a seller, if you start talking about market stats and all this stuff, they're not going to register anything if you don't understand their needs. So here's an example. You want to start talking about market information with the client. You're going to talk about all this data that I'm going to provide you guys in a minute. But you have no idea, for example, that the couple you're sitting down with is in the process of going through a divorce, or they're planning another baby, or they're moving away, or their finances are creeping up, which is probably a very common trend right now, guys, as people are reaching the point where they can no longer afford their houses. Even with the interest rates, it's still the cost of living that people are not taking into consideration. Like, how much is a basket of groceries today versus, say, even just a year ago, 2 years ago, right? You multiply that over 4 weeks. And, when people are on a stretched budget, obviously it's going to have a direct impact on their life and their affordability for their mortgage. So first note, guys, most important thing, what I always ask the seller is, I say, hey, listen, we're going to put your house on the market for sale. What happens when we sell your house? What does that do for you? Right? If you're buying the house, fine. Okay, sure. But why are you selling your house? And what happens if we don't sell your house in 3 months? I always ask, what happens if we don't sell your house in 6 months? What happens if your house doesn't sell at all? Or what happens if the list price that we set up for you doesn't bear fruit because the market's not playing in your favor. The market will speak to us as we go through the process. And the market is speaking whispers to us saying, we're not in the right price range. We need to drop by 10, 15, 20, 30%. What does that do for your family? What are the outcomes? Once you get this information, guys, then you're going to be able to actually do your job. So I equate this role as, if you're going to be a contractor, you're going to show up to a construction site. If you're going to be a framer, well, when you get set up for work in the morning, you put your tool belt on and then you put your hammer and all your tools, right? As a real estate agent, if you're not going to cultivate the information from the seller or the buyer, depending on the scenario, if you're not going to cultivate that information, 100%, it's like showing up, you're going to start hammering nails with your fist. It's not going to be good. It's not something you want to do. So I wanted to cover that before I get into the data. Super important. That's the how you use the data. Now, when it comes to the factors that I'm going to bring forward, this is super, super powerful, guys. And I would urge you that after you go through this, you can either send me a text or an email. If you're looking for some of the information, I could give you the resources where to go. But these are numbers that most realtors don't even understand in the slightest bit. They don't use them at all. And this is what's going to differentiate you from your competition if you're competing for a listing. So what are the market trends that will impact buyers and sellers? First is going to be supply and demand. So, and I'm not talking about supply and demand just like, hey, what's the absorption rate of the market, so on. Supply and demand, what I'm talking about here is what is the supply of new homes being built on the market and what is the supply being absorbed by the market. And not just, so absorption in this category comes into two prongs. One is the absorption of what is the rate of people buying those homes, right? So if there's 100,000 homes being built and 100,000 are bought, that's 100% absorption. But there's not just that metric, which a lot of people don't realize. There's also the future demand, which is what is the rate of people that are either entering or about to enter the market that will take a portion of that supply. That's either people coming of age or entering an aspect or a part of their lives or a season of their life that will put them in a position to buy a home. That's one, right? The other is immigration. So the main categories is going to be immigration, right? Immigration affects cash, which I'll get into in a moment, cash in the market, and then absorption of inventory. Then there's inflation, unemployment, economic growth, vacancy rates, housing starts. And then there's taxation and labor force in the end. So I'm going to skim these topics, but what I'm really trying to do is to pre-frame thinking outside the box so that you can bring a fresh perspective to your buyers and sellers, speaking to a global market and a macro market that gives you insights to share with your clients, that puts you in a position where you really understand not just the marketplace, but the driving forces behind the marketplace. And why this is so important is there are people that are reactive and there are people that are proactive. So if you are reactive to the marketplace, you're watching the real estate market and you're watching prices come down or prices go up. And then you're saying, oh, we need to adjust, or, oh, we need to do this, oh, we need to do that. But if you're on the proactive side of things, you're watching the indicators that will drive those numbers up or down so that you can foresee or foreshadow for your clients so that your insights give them an edge above the competition. This is why those numbers are so crucial. Because, for example, if you know that somebody's showing up with $100,000 of cash and they're going to buy whatever it is, they're going to buy all the eggs and you're an egg supplier. Okay. Well, if you know that there's an influx of cash coming in and there's foreign investment coming in that wants to buy up our egg supply, well, if you are just watching the price of eggs, then you're sitting there on your computer and you're like, whoa, egg prices are up. I got to adjust. But if you're watching the market and you're in the know and you go, oh, by the way, there's a big producer or there's somebody's coming in who's buying a large portion of eggs, I know that this is going to happen. You start to buy your eggs before that happens. Now you get to enjoy some of the inflation in your pockets as opposed to paying a higher price for eggs, if that makes sense. I'm sure it's the right example, but it's the best thing that comes to mind at the time. So immigration. I don't know if you guys are aware, but a lot of the numbers that you're going to see in the marketplace are complete BS. Things like inflation and immigration, the numbers they give us are not true. They're not fictional. They're fictional. Or they leave out certain things that are super important. I'll talk about inflation in a minute. When it comes to immigration, I want you to ask yourself, try to answer this question real quick. You may or may not know this already. Do you know how many immigrants we brought in 2023? If someone wants to take a shot, I'm curious if we've got the posted number of the actual number. Nobody knows? Close to 2.2 million. A 4% increase on our population just in immigration. 4% population growth in 2023. Now, the government has gone on and said, oh, whoa, our bad. It was really bad. We're going to try to slow that down because the labor market's getting squeezed out by, what do you call them? Low-skill workers that are going to the Tim Hortons and so on, and then they're competing. So then Tim Hortons is able to bring down their labor costs and so on. But what the government said, yeah, we're going to slow it down. But turns out in 2024, even though they're telling us that they're slowing it down, they're actually increasing. It's out of control this year. We might even see 3 million immigrants, which means that a population growth of close to 10% over 2 years. Just so let me ask you another question as we're going on this now. If we're increasing our population in the 2 year or even say 3 years by 10%, how much strain is this going to put on our housing supply? These people are coming in. And by the way, go back to my initial point, we're talking about cash in the market. I don't know if you guys know this. One of the biggest driving forces for inflation, number one, obviously, is the balance between supply and demand. But one of the key indicators behind that, guys, is people coming to Canada with cash. Immigrants coming in that are wealthy increases inflation. Because people say, oh, yeah, we want rich immigrants. I love it. It's amazing because they're coming with money and they're spending money in our economy. But the problem is if we're not manufacturing at a higher pace in order to meet the demands that these immigrants have that have cash, well, the cost of goods is going to go up because they're all competing for the same goods. There's more money, but there's the same amount of goods. So obviously the cost of goods goes up. That's inflation. So when we're talking about immigration, 2 million immigrants, does anybody know what the housing start was for 2023? This one I'm curious. I'd love to hear somebody take a stab at it. How many houses did Canada build in 2023 with 2 million immigrants that have come in? Anyone? Okay, so this is the fun thing. I'm assuming either you guys are a bunch of church mouses or you don't know the numbers. I'll take church mouses and numbers. The fun thing is you should know these numbers. You should know these numbers as a realtor. Super important. 220,000, roughly, is the estimate. So if Canada built 220,000 houses in 2023, and we immigrated 2 million people, can somebody explain to me what happens to the 1.75 million immigrants? Where do they stay? So what does that do to our housing supply? Obviously, it eats it up. So if a person says to me, Mark, what do you think is going to happen? Like interest rates, They're looking at all these little numbers. Well, inventory absorption and all this stuff. What do you think my house is going to be worth in 3 to 5 years? I'm looking at them and saying, well, look, if I could connect two brain cells together and I look at just the metrics of immigration alone and our housing starts, your house will be worth a fortune. A fortune, because more people and less houses, it doesn't matter how you look at it. Well, what if Canadians can't afford the houses? The rich immigrants will buy the houses from the Canadians and then rent them back to them. That's the outcome. That's what's inevitably going to happen if Canadians can't afford to buy houses. I don't know if you guys have ever been to Switzerland, but like, I don't know, 12 years ago or something like that, I went to my ex-wife was from Switzerland, so we went to Switzerland. And like to buy like a little house in Geneva, okay, it's like you can't even buy houses there. People will literally generationally rent their houses. Like if your parents die, you'll inherit their apartment and you just stay there and rent because there's no housing. It's so small. It's a rich country. There's very little debt, but houses are like a small little house is worth like 3 million, $4 million, like 10 years ago. I don't even want to know what they look like today, what the housing prices is there, but it just gives you an idea. It's like, that's insane. Yes. And the average income in Switzerland is a little higher, but it doesn't matter. Like people buy those houses and then they hold on to them. The rich hold on to them. So housing, unbelievable, unbelievable. And if you look at city by city, the city of Ottawa, if we're going to isolate people here that live in Ottawa, this city has reached 1 million in population. Was it like 2 years ago or whatever? Historically speaking, this is an interesting stat you could take home. Every single major city in the world, once it reaches 1 million people in population, something happens and it triggers a parabolic growth. I don't understand it. I don't know why, but if you look at it, Google it, it's a stat. Population goes parabolic. And we're dealing with an immigration crisis. So you've got those two things together. So the city of Ottawa is poised to have a really huge increase. Now, going back to housing starts. Okay. 220,000 homes roughly in 2023, and we're online for roughly the same this year. Of that, only 130,000 of those are homes, like single family homes, townhouses, da da da. And then 90,000 are apartments. Now, why is that so important? What happens when people can't afford to buy their houses, to live in their houses? They sell and they go rent. So this is for you, those of you here that are looking for investors for clients. If I was you guys, the first thing I would do after I get off this call, I would go get my stats together and I would call every smart person I know and I'd say, listen, prices right now are collapsed because of what's happened over the last 3 years. There's incredible buy opportunities right now because of the interest rate climate, and interest rates are coming down, which means we're trending in the right direction, right? There's a great saying, I've heard this before and I use it all the time now, is date the rate, marry the real estate. Okay? You're just flirting with the rate because it's not a long term. But when you buy the real estate when the rates are high, you're not going to stay high on the rates, but the real estate will go the long haul. If you hold on to real estate for 20 years, there's no way you're going to be worth less today than you were 20 years later. But when people are looking at the interest rates like this and they're going, oh my God, I'm like, well, listen, it's simple. The rates are coming down. They're gonna continue to come down. Eventually they will, no matter what. Because the number one driving force of every economy, the number one driving force, guys, is real estate. I don't know if you guys know that, but now you know. Real estate is the number one driving force for economical growth, period. Can't argue it. So when a government is trying to surge the economy or put the paddles to a faltering or shuddering economy, what do? They drive real estate. This is why when the economy in the world was going to crapshoot, right, during the bubble in 2008, Canada did it very well because they drove real estate. Stephen Harper had a brilliant economical team, and they put the wheels to real estate, which then offset our recession, which we didn't even feel the recession, and the world was in one. Canada did one of the best in the world at the time, and now not the same decision making in government, so probably the worst, but that's okay. All this does is creates opportunities. So now, immigration. Going to labor force. That's another impact that people don't understand. Availability of skilled workers. Okay, so people, especially trades workers, right? If you don't have a ready workforce, then work takes longer and the labor that you have is in short supply and they become more expensive. What does this do? Drives up the cost of goods, drives up the cost of everything across the board. like all the materials for your house, windows, doors. And if we can't afford to make them here, or we can't produce here, then we have to outsource. And when you're outsourcing, because Canada is not really good right now with the world, we pay a lot of tariffs and fees, right? Like softwood, stuff like that with the US, all sorts of things. Well, that's exporting, anyways. So workforce availability, and then cost of skilled labor. Those are factors. And you could Google this, guys. You could see online, you say, Google, what is the availability of skilled workforce, and there's Stats Canada has stats and so on. Okay. Housing starts, we've touched on that. 130,000 houses, 90,000 apartments. When people are buying and building, and when the builders stop building, then that puts a squeeze on the inventory. It's that simple. When people can't afford to buy their houses, they go and they rent. So rental properties right now are the best real estate you can buy, period. Period. Because if people can't afford to buy homes, they have to rent homes. They have to rent places, which means that right now, the cost because of the interest rate has driven down because the numbers don't work for a lot of rental properties. If you guys have had investors, you're probably realizing that the interest rate and the costs don't add up because the cash flow is not there. But if you're able to make the numbers work in the short term, rents are up, by the way, substantially versus where they were at, right? Vacancy rate, so you guys know, in the city of Ottawa is 1.6%. So there's only 1.6% availability. Like all the apartment, 98.4% of our apartments are rented. Okay. So what this means is all these people, the immigrants that are coming in, they don't have a place to rent. And when that happens, the landlords, well, if you can rent your house quickly, you just increase your price. It's that simple, right? When you get turnover in your units, you increase your rents. With the interest rates where they are, everybody's increased their rents to try to offset the losses, right? I know Jagmeet says that landlords are getting rich. No, they're increasing their rents so that they could afford to pay for the increase in interest rate that they've got. They're not getting rich. They will get rich in 5 years when this whole thing turns around. Rents continue to climb, but interest rates come down. So, guys, I would encourage you to talk to your clients, buy rental properties, or hold them for your life if you can, because now is not the right time to sell rental properties. Interest rates. When interest rates go up, we all know this, the cost of buying a house goes up. But what people don't understand is, here's something that I've said to my clients, and they actually understand. Manufacturing in Canada or most parts of the world, what happens is when those people build things, they actually use a line of credit, all of them. So they have these massive lines of credit. They go and they buy the goods, they buy they buy everything, and then it get manufactured, and then they sell, because the people that are buying the goods from them don't pay for them until after they're built. Well, nobody's going to go and invest millions and millions and millions of dollars of their cash flow to buy and build goods. No, they get facilities through the bank. The bank gives them lines of credit. They use that to operate, because if you're growing your business, for example, well, you don't have the cash to go and grow your business. You need that line of credit, right? So lines of credit at an affordable price stimulate economic growth because demand goes up. But then when demand goes up, supply needs to be provided, and they use lines of credit to purchase what they need in order to grow their business. That's how it works. Lines of credit are completely designed for growth. Think about it as watering the plant. That's what the line of credit are. So when the cost of the lines of credit is like prime plus 2% or prime plus 3%, well, where historically they were paying 2, 3, or 4%, they're now paying 8%, right, on their lines of credit. So that means is producing goods in Canada has slowed down because they can't afford the cost of the interest to grow their business. So now we have what's called as a shrinking market. Our GDP is much lower than what it should have been. We're one of the lowest producers, or one of the lowest GDPs in the G7. The G7 is the 7 most developed nations in the world. Canada ranks the worst. And I know that the government's saying they're doing all these great things yeah, well, we can all use stats to lie. Bill Gates wrote a book called How to Use Statistics to Lie. Um, How to Lie with Statistics to Win. Like, the reality is we're not producing as much and our economy is shrinking. What does that mean is small businesses are shrinking. There's a huge amount of bankruptcies happening, which, by the way, guys, it's another statistic that I didn't throw in this, but I'm just going to top in. Um, right now in Canada, as of today, we are seeing an excess of 300 bankruptcies per day. At this rate, if it doesn't change, that means that 5% of the population would be filing for bankruptcy in the next 10 years. 5% of the entire population of Canada would be bankrupt. That's it's astronomical at this rate. And I've got friends that are in the business and they're telling me they're expecting those numbers to double in the fall, which is like 30 to 60 days from now. Another thing that we should all be keeping an eye on, which I'm just throwing in here at the last second, is the railway strike that's coming in, which is supposed to be today, I believe. If this happens, this will cost the Canadian economy $1 billion a day. $1 billion a day. That's if they run this for 30 days, it's $30 billion. That's I don't know. So, guys, what does that do? That impacts our food supply, which means it drives up the price of our goods, and our CPI, our consumer price index, which is a basket of goods. So I'm just going to touch on this really quick. And guys, you might be asking, well, probably not, but if you're asking yourself, why am I bringing this information forward? Because all of these things tie to affordability. So if affordability is trending upwards, which means people have more cash available, then they start to live a better life. They buy vehicles, they buy car, they buy this, they buy that, and then they buy houses. They upgrade their houses, they upgrade their life. That's just the way the economy works. Well, if affordability is trending downwards, then people stop spending. People will start downsizing. People start doing, get rid of the car, buy something cheaper. This is what happens. And then when you start to do that, car dealers have less salespeople. Mechanic shops has less maintenance and repair. Contractors, less landscaping is being done. Less renovations are happening. That's a shrinking economy. Okay, that's a recession. That's what happened. It recedes, right? Like the ocean, right? Well, right now we're receding. We are in a recession. I don't care what anybody says. They're lying otherwise. We're in a recession. We've been in a recession for a year and a half. People just have no idea because they're living on credit. Well, credit's about to run out. So why that's so important, the CPI, again, going on index. And if you want to talk to your clients about this, I have these conversations because they appreciate it. Because I'm like, well, guys, if I can't afford to buy groceries and you bought your townhouse for $650,000 and now you think you're going to get $700,000 because you don't want to lose the dime and you expect the market to magically make up an extra 50 grand that doesn't exist so that you can afford to pay for my fees. If I start talking about things like the CPI index and immigration and so on, they're going to get the sense. I'm like, look, if you want to wait 2 or 3 years, immigration will play in your favor. Let's hold on. That's where it goes back to my initial point where I'm talking about understanding their goals. But if they say, Mark, we need to sell now because my mortgage is coming up for renewal in 3 months and I cannot afford the new payment, they say, well, if we look at the trends, if we look at where things are going, the inflation's not coming down, guys. So, it's coming down. But what they've done is they've changed out the basket of goods. The basket of goods is what are the things that Canadians need to use to buy and then to live a regular life, like a carton of milk, eggs, meat, and they'll use very specific measures. Well, what they're doing in the CPI index, guys, if you don't know this, is, for example, like say 3 years ago, the CPI was like, how much is it for a 6-ounce sirloin steak? And they'd be like, okay, it's $10. Well, now they say, well, that same 6-ounce sirloin steak is $32. Well, that's a 300% increase. So what they do is they call the people at the CPI and they go, hey guys, if we post these numbers online, people are going to panic when they realize how much it's costing them to buy a piece of steak. They go, what can we do? They go, sub it out for ground beef, same price. Then they take out the steak and they put it for 6 ounces of chuck ground beef. that's only maybe 2% more. But chuck ground beef 3 years ago was a third of the price, right? But they're playing with the numbers, or they'll remove things altogether and put something different. Like, oh, coffee's up huge. Okay, we'll pull out coffee and we'll say, well, people now they're more conscious. They're drinking tea. Oh, like put tea in. So inflation's a lie. It's a total lie. It's way higher. We've seen a probably 200 or 300% rate on our inflation, truly. And what does that mean? Cost of living goes up. So, lastly, guys, cost of energy, gas. We all know this. The price of gas 100% affects the cost of real estate. You have to transport goods, you have to transport wood, you have to transport. I've built apartments, houses, you name it. The cost of materials today, even if it's come down a little bit, is way more than it was 4 years ago. Your dollar per square foot is way higher. So if you can't afford to buy materials because the cost of transportation of said material is up. So if you're watching all of these numbers, so this is just giving you the understanding of how to look at things and what to look at and start to piece them together. You can make an argument is if you look at, for example, the price of gas coming down, you can almost automatically assume that when price of gas starts to come down, then the cost of transportation of goods is going to go up. It's going to go down, sorry. And then you'll get better deals, which means your cost of construction is going to come down. So if you're watching your market trends, this is what you want to do. So you, again, summarizing, immigration, the rate of immigration is your supply and demand, because at the heart of it all, supply and demand is what drives the cost. So right now, the supply is tight and we're underproducing by like 80% of our housing needs. So like you just have to say that. Everything else I've said is just gravy. And your clients will pretty much understand if they're looking to buy real estate, that's a number you're going to want to use. If they're looking to sell in the near future, you're going to want to use these numbers to show that over the next 12 months, we're not going to see a rosy picture. Even with interest rates coming down, the cost of living is still astronomical. So yes, interest rates will come down. Oh, if they're going to come down to say 2% or 3%, look at what happened before. Well, yes, that's going to help people be able to buy houses and it's making more affordable. But the houses are way more expensive than they were, say, 4 years ago, say 2020, before it started to explode. And then it's going to cost more on your cost of living. Like a Honda CRV or something like that, it's like $700 now. It used to be 300. So yes, even if the interest rates come down, it's going to take at least a year to a year and a half for the effects of the reduced interest rates to have an impact on the real estate market, because it has a trickle down effect. So yes, the rate's going to be good, but people are just going to rush the streets and start buying. What's going to happen is manufacturing is going to start ramping up. Jobs are going to start coming back. People are going to be transporting goods for cheaper prices. There's going to be more negotiation on that. And then eventually the price will start coming down as more housing starts pick up. And housing starts is like a 3 to 5 year rollout, by the way. It takes forever for that number to really impact. But just goes to show. But your real estate is actually going to go up quite a bit with these factors. So some of this is pretty dry. And there's a reason why a lot of people don't follow these numbers, because they're not exciting. It's not sexy. I've done some training that before that's like, people really love and find it super exciting. But this is something that I use in almost all my conversations. I secured like a $1.5 million price adjustment over like a series of properties from one of my clients. And because he was being stubborn, which is okay. But when I painted a picture of where the economy is going over the next 12 months, and I understand where his goals are, he needs to sell in a certain window of time, then I was able to say, well, look, like, you're a smart guy, you're a business guy. Let's look at the numbers. Where do you think you're going to be in 3 months from now? If I don't have this conversation with you right now, you're going to regret it, because I wouldn't be doing you any service, because in 3 months from now, I'm a reactive agent then, and I'm just waiting for the market to play against you. And then I'm telling you, oh, look, the market's down, so we should reduce. I'm telling my client, look, I'm doing a favor by letting you reduce your price now, because in 3 months from now, it's going to be way worse, especially going into winter months. Keeping in mind your seasons, guys. If you got any listings right now, you should be dropping all of your prices in the next 10 days. aggressively. Historically speaking, I typically don't carry listings between December, well, end of November and January. If I've got stuff that people are lingering they want, I try to either cancel and relist, sell, or delete. I don't like carrying inventory in the winter months. Guys, I don't know if I got, sorry, I don't know if I got kicked off there for a second. So anybody have any questions?
Mark, I have a question.
Yeah,
It's Daira. So for the like I love data and stats and like Steve can tell you that. And I've been trying to build you know, like find information outside of what's available in our real estate board. And the main place that I can get this data that you're talking about is like the CMHC data and Stats
yeah,
Canada. And I've
yeah,
noticed that, so that's what I was going to ask you is one, where do we get the most accurate data? And two, I noticed like I go deep into these reports and it's so difficult for someone
yeah,
like me as a realtor to find it difficult to find this information that it's readily available to the public is so disappointing. Most of these reports are from 2022. They don't
yeah,
update them for 8 to 9 months. I've reached out directly to the people who create these reports and they're so behind. It's so unorganized on the website. So where can we go
yeah.
for up-to-date information outside of, or is that really it, is CMHC and Stats Canada?
Yeah, well, CMHC and Stats Can are obviously going to be your best. And right now, you're pretty much pulling off of your 2023 numbers, and that's normal.
Yeah.
Like you'll have like a quarterly update, which is available right now. Like on the CMHC website, right? You can pull. So, for example, 2023 recap of new home construction trends in Canada. This article was posted March 27th, 2024. I've got some of these resources open in case people had questions. So it's a great question. Now, what I would say there's two ways to go about it. The first way is going to be AI. So I don't know where you guys are at with Chat GPT or which is there's one by Elon Musk. I forget the name of it, but anyways, there's Chat GPT is an easy one. You could literally go to the Chat GPT and you say, I'm looking for statistics for housing in Canada. Where can I go to get the most accurate and up to date information? Can you link me to those websites? And it'll like chat will like scour the internet and find them for you. And it'll give you the
Oh,
links. Yeah. Yeah. And here's the fun thing, Sarah. Like if you get a report, so this is one thing that I do, by the way. You go get a report, and if it's got like all these crazy numbers that you don't understand, you can plug that information into the AI bot and ask it to summarize it to you. You say, look, like I'm a realtor, I'm looking for this information. Can you compile and summarize this data for me in one paragraph? My audience is going to be the following, and I need to give these data points for them. And bam, done. Hours and
amazing.
hours
Okay,
and hours of research done in 60 seconds.
perfect. Thank you. Thanks,
Yeah,
Mark.
you're welcome. Guys, I'm gonna just touch on this really quickly before I close this out. Um, Chat, GPT, AI technology, if you are not using it, start using it. People don't understand the power behind it. I use it like a research assistant. Like, scientists, when they do their work, they've got assistants that work for them that go and get all the data they need. Or like if you go to a law firm, you're a lawyer, you've got an assistant that goes and combs through all the case law to do all the grunt work. I use chat the same exact way, but it's way more effective than any person. Like if you were to put $1 per hour and the amount of hours of work you could get done, Chat does it all. It's unbelievable. Compiles data. Like, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but you can even get the market information for like a CMA you want to do. Rather than to get the tool on realtor.ca to do it, you pull all the stats that you want, throw them into the chat, ask it to break it down for you and to give you a report that you're going to take to a client, and it'll do it for you. And it's genius. It's genius. All right.
Mark,
Last year.
Mark, I have a quick question.
Yes.
Um, hi.
Question.
Just a few minutes ago, you said something about you kind of said it fast, but you said you don't hold listings typically in like the summer months, and when
Winter
you
months.
do, yeah. And then you said you should get your clients down in prices on your listings in the next 10 days.
Yes.
What would that conversation look like? Can you give me like a
Yeah.
couple key points?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you the conversations that I've been having for the last 3 weeks in anticipation of this, because I don't wait for the last minute. I have seasonality to my work, right? So I anticipate 14 years of doing this. I know what's coming. I should at this point. So
Yeah.
I'd say if you're selling a single family home, I'd say, hey, listen, Michelle, just having a quick call right now to update you the where we're at with your listing. Now, I know we've been on the market for about, say, I don't know, say 60 days. And sadly, we haven't received any offers yet. So, based on the conversation that we had before, I know that you stressed that it was really important to have your home sold in the next, say, 3 to 6 months. I know that if we don't get your home sold in the next 3 to 6 months, there are a series of things that'll happen in your life that would be less than favorable. Is it fair to say? Am I understanding that correctly? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So now the most important role of my job as a listing agent is not just to say I'm going to be the best marketer and I'm the best negotiator and the most important part of my job, the first and foremost, is to be an honest realtor that operates out of integrity and that does what's important for the best interests of my clients, not in the best interests of me. What I mean by this is simple. If I sit here and I wait for the market to play in my favor, which will eventually push you to reduce your price because I don't feel like having a hard conversation with you, you will eventually reduce your price and I could just blame the market. I will get paid, you will get hosed, you win, I win, you lose. Now, the hardest part of my job, which I've taken a lot of pride of doing, is doing what's best for my client by telling you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. Because as of right now, we have the second busiest market of the year coming. There's back to school, people are closing up their cottages. We're reaching a point where people are coming back from vacations. The nights are getting shorter, the weather is getting a little cooler. People are drinking less, partying less, starting to think about the fall, which means they're starting to think about housing. So historically speaking, end of August, September, October, and maybe the first week of November is the last selling season to sell your home to a marketplace that is actively moving before we start to hunker down for the winter. November, December, January, February are amongst the slowest months of the year, and people do not sell their houses in this season unless they absolutely have to. So if you absolutely have to sell your home, then you're putting yourself in an unfavorable position in the eyes of a buyer. Because I'll tell you what, I don't want to leave my house for Christmas dinner on December 10th, cleaning and scouring up with the hopes of somebody drugging through my house with their dirty boots to maybe sell my house. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. And you know what? We understand that. So I understand that. So I don't want to put you in that position right now by just letting the market do the work. So I'm letting you right now, if we don't become the most competitive house on the market right now, which means we need to put you at a price point where you will be the next sale, the only way we will become competitive later is by race to the bottom. And trust me, I'm fit to run. I could run that race. If you want to run that race, that's fine. But I want to have that in an email that you're okay to have a race to the bottom later. Because I want to know that we've had this conversation, that you clearly understand what I've told you. That if we don't reduce the price right now and make you the most competitive house on the market, then you are going to get hosed later. Point in case. The market is not playing in your favor. Is it an upward market or is it a downward market? Are we going to have less sales in December or more sales? So if you're holding off until then to make a decision to become more competitive, you have wasted and squandered away all the best market days available where people are still buying because it's a good time to buy without having to go and rob people in November, December, January, February. So my suggestion is we bite the bullet now without eating the bullets later. That's it.
Okay. I like that. Thank you.
No problem. My pleasure.
Five calls ahead of after this.
Yes. Yes. Get yourself fired up and go for the goals. Make sure they know that. Absolutely. We're reducing everything like crazy. Like literally right now, it's like reduce, reduce, reduce. And by the way, like I don't like to say like reduce with my clients. I say improve.
Mm-hmm.
I know it sounds fromage, but like I literally tell people like I don't like to use price reduction because reduce means that you had something. So I've said this to people like, oh, well, why do I have to reduce my price? I'm like, well, I don't like to use reduction because to reduce something means you have something to begin with and then you reduce it from that mark. No, we were asking a price and now we're asking a different price. There's no reduction there. All we're doing is we're actually asking a price for something that nobody wants to pay. So we're improving the price so somebody wants to pay because we want something. When you want something, you don't reduce anything, you improve it.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? You know the language? It's like I don't reduce anything of value. I have to improve it. Improve means to make it more favorable for the person that wants it.
Love
Anyone
it.
else?
Thank you.
My pleasure. Well, you guys got me. All right, guys. So this concludes it. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me. You've got my email, Marc with the C at teamtoday.ca. And happy to have a conversation with you guys.